Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to the undergraduate webinar series, an interactive online platform connecting high school students to the Ashoka community. In this series, we cover topics related to Ashoka's undergraduate program, where our academic counselors, students, and faculty guide you in understanding the various aspects of the university. Thank you all for joining us today for the webinar. Q&A with admissions. My name is Priya Basumatari, and I'm an assistant manager at the Office of Outreach. Joining me today are Kopal Agarwal, Senior Manager, Ashoka Office of Admissions, and Manat Kalkat, Deputy Manager, Office of Admissions at Ashoka University. Together, we will be addressing some of your queries on the Ashoka undergraduate admissions process. Without further ado, let's get started. Before we begin, I would request our audience to kindly type in any questions they may have in the Q&A box provided on your Zoom screen, and we will address them towards the end of the session. Over to you, Kopal and Manat.
Hi, Priya. So, I'd like to begin with wishing everybody all the best as they are in the process of filling out their application forms. And, we'd just like to emphasize that the deadline for round 3, for which you might be in the process of filling out your application forms, is in 4 days from now. It's on the 15th of April. So, and I think, the first question that we've gotten from everybody here is also about the deadline. And, we take that question. The question is, what is the benefit of applying in round 3 and the deadline? So, as I stated, the deadline is 15th of April. And the benefit for people applying in round 3 is that you can apply without your board marks, and you can also apply without CUET, right? So you all would have recently gotten done, at least most of you would have gotten done with your board examinations. And, you can apply without, feeling burdened about your marks. You can apply with your predicted scores in your application, either with your self-predicted or your counselor predicted scores. And you do not have to, submit your CUET scores as well. Yeah. Priya, over to you.
Right. All right. So the next question is there any application fee for the undergraduate program?
I can take that question. Hello, everyone. Hope you're in the process of completing your application to Ashoka. And to answer Priya's question, no, there is no fee for applying to Ashoka. There is no application fee for applying to Ashoka. You can, it's free of cost. So, please do take your time to fill out the application. There's no harm in kind of trying. There's no harm in applying and, seeing where it goes. So yeah, to repeat, there is no application fee for Ashoka University.
All right. Here's another question for you, Manat. What does Ashoka look for in a student?
That's an interesting question. But, there is no one particular characteristic or, one particular parameter as such that, we look for in students, because as everyone knows, we do look at individuals holistically and, do look at various components of what makes a person who they are. Having said that, what Ashoka also looks for is some demonstrated curiosity in the field that they are looking to pursue. And also, having kind of, explored that subject or, that particular area a bit, just having some idea of what it is that you'd like to pursue, and also a coherent, application. We do like to see some well-written essays. We also get like a few essays from students with just 2-3 lines, which we do not recommend, as we don't really go forward with such applications. So do take the time to think through what you want to put on your application so that it reflects who you are as individuals, right? Because we also love to see that, and gives us points to talk about in interviews. So yeah, we do like seeing some coherence in essays. We do like seeing some coherence in applications, and overall we do like seeing students being curious about wanting to pursue education further, and students being curious about Ashoka in general. So I think those are some of the things we do look for in students.
Right. Just to follow up to that, Manat, what are some of the factors that affect a student's admission?
Like I said, right, there's no one particular factor in, on the basis of which we decide, okay, this person's not a good fit or this person is a right fit for Ashoka. There are various factors that we do look at, various things we take into consideration, which is why we also have an interview process, which is why, we also have the assessment in relation along with your application that you will be submitting. So, we do look at all these components, and, when talking about factors that may kind of affect your admissions, we do look at all of this in a holistic manner, looking at who you are as a person, basically, and seeing whether, not just you would be a right fit for Ashoka, but also whether Ashoka would be the right fit for you. We do look at that harmony, when we are making our final decisions.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Manath. Here's a question for you, Gokul. Is there any preparation required for AAA, which is Ashoka Aptitude Assessment? How are students supposed to go about it?
Right. So there is, the AAA has two components. One is the thinking skills assessment, and the other is the on-the-spot essay. And both of these things have been designed to be taken with minimal preparation. And, we do realize that students do feel, anxiety before any assessments. So to ease them into this process, we've also made available some sample papers that they can go through just to familiarize themselves with the pattern of the questions that will be asked for the AAA. So both for the thinking skills assessment and the the online, the OSC, the on-the-spot essay. So, you'll find sample papers for both these components of the AAA. And the on-the-spot essay typically asks 2 questions. And, it will just look at how you engage with information that how do you present arguments in a written manner, which can be, coherent to the reader and also to the writer. So that's the on-the-spot essay. And the thinking skills assessment is, think of it like solving puzzles. So it has 2 components. One is problem solving skills and the other is critical thinking skills. And it has 40 MCQ questions. So, if you look at, and I think in the chat box, you'll also be able to look at, these links where you'll be able to find the sample papers. So, there are 40 MCQs. And you just have to tick, there is no negative marking. So, it's a very, very student-friendly assessment.
Right. Thank you so much for clarifying that, Gokul. Here's the next question. And it is perhaps one of the most asked questions. How much financial aid does Ashoka provide?
All right. So, just to sort of set some expectations here, admissions and financial aid at Ashoka are 2 separate processes. Right. So we do not let the admission offer have any bearing on financial aid, offered to students and vice versa. So, once you receive an offer of admission from Ashoka, you can apply for financial aid, and it is a need-based financial aid, right? It's not a merit financial base. It's not, it's not a scholarship. It's a financial aid. So, your propensity to pay for your education at Ashoka will be assessed by the financial aid office, and depending on what they deem fit for your slab, that is the amount of financial aid that would be granted to you.
Right. Thank you so much for that. Here's another question for you, Gokul. Does Ashoka offer science courses? Are there any scholarships for the same?
Right. So, when you fill out your application forms and where you indicate the preferences in major that you may have, you will see that Ashoka does have a lot of science options. It offers a lot of natural sciences like biology, physics, chemistry, and sciences like mathematics and computer science as well. They are pure majors and they're also interdisciplinary majors, right? So there's lots to choose from. And there are, initially I just said that the university does not have scholarships, but it does actually have a few select scholarships for science programs. So it's a need and, a merit scholarship for science only. So, whenever you fill out your application and when you're in the process of your post-admissions work, you may want to keep an eye out for that as well.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Gokul. Here's a question for you, Manath. And these are questions that I have received during coffee chats held in Guwahati city. So a student asked, I have not read a lot of books. In fact, nothing apart from course books. Is it advisable to leave the book section blank in that case? Mana, did you get my question?
I think Manat's video is probably, lagging behind. Why don't I take that question?
Right, sure.
And if there's something that I've missed out on, maybe Manat can add. So, first of all, I think it will be not possible for you to submit. I think Manat's back.
Yes. I'm sorry about that. There's a slight internet disturbance I'm having in my place. So yeah. It's a short answer. It's not advisable to leave it blank. I don't think you can move on with your application if you leave that part blank. We do ask for at least a minimum of 3 books. I'm sure you must have read at least 3 books during the time, during your high school education, or, even someday, right? And so we kind of ask for 3 books that have had some sort of an impact at least on you as an individual, 3 books that somewhere have kind of spoken to you or have really caught your interest. And the reason we ask for such things is because it gives us something to talk about during the interviews, right? It gives us a glimpse into who you are as an individual outside of your academic interests, and we do like seeing that aspect of people and seeing that side of people. So I do recommend, thinking really hard about some of the books that you have read, and, some of the books that you feel have had an impact on you, or some of the books you feel you've just enjoyed, and, taking the time out to really kind of, fill in that section of the application, because it is kind of mandatory, and you won't be, you can't move forward without having completed it first.
Yes, thank you so much for answering that, Manath. Here's another question, and there's a lot of nervousness around this as well, because students have to upload their predicted grades. They either have to predict it themselves or their school does it for them. But at the end of the day, this is just a prediction. So students are always nervous about the same. I received this question. A student asked if they receive a conditional offer and they happen to score less than what they had predicted. What happens then? What is the kind of range that Ashoka is looking for?
Right. So, before I answer that, I just want to say that Ashoka follows a particular philosophy for admitting students, which is a holistic philosophy. And throughout the process of our assessment and evaluation of an application, we do not emphasize on a particular parameter. Right, so a particular score will not get you in, and similarly, a particular score that you may have gotten will also not disqualify you from, being able to attend Ashoka. So this is something that will also transfer to conditional offers. While conditional offers will be contingent upon you, scoring the predicted scores that you have mentioned in your application, but you have to realize that these are not, bulk decisions that we just send out. So every application is individually reviewed, and every application is individually, evaluated to see where you may have fallen short, and what happened with your predicted scores. How have your other scores been? How have your other, application parameters been? How well have you engaged with the application? So do not worry if you haven't scored, exactly what you predicted. You may have scored more, or you may even have, scored less. But that in itself will not disqualify you. So do submit your scores whenever you get them, and the admissions committee will review everything in its entirety with your application, with how your interview was, with how your Ashoka aptitude assessment was, and then make the final decision on your candidature.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Gopal. Manath, here's a question for you. A student had recently asked me what is a SAT super score, SAT super score, and I would like you to clarify it for the rest of our audience as well.
All right. So once individuals give their SATs, they receive a quantitative score and a qualitative score. Out of 800, the total being 1600. So some students give their SAT multiple times, right? Not just one time. Some of them, we do see some people who have attempted it about 2-3 times. So what a super score actually means is that you take the highest score out of each attempt, and you kind of give that score to us. So let's say attempt 1, you have your reading and written score that is 600, and in attempt 2, your reading and writing score is 700. So you'll, instead of taking the attempt 1's score, you will take the score of your second attempt. And similarly, if you've scored higher on in your math in attempt 1 as opposed to attempt 2, you will take your attempt 1's math score. So, that's what the super score actually means. It means taking the highest score of like your respective SAT tests, like whatever component you've received your highest score in, and, giving us that score.
Great. Thank you so much for clarifying that, Manat. Here's another question for you. Apart from the Ashoka aptitude test, is there a weightage of CUET and board exam marks? I know this has been covered, but I think we need to clarify this once again.
Yeah, there's no specific, weightage that we do give to like, board marks or CVT. I mean, of course, they're important. I'm not going to say they're not important, but it's not like your decision is contingent purely on these parameters. There's a lot more that goes into the decision making. Having said that, as Kopal mentioned earlier, when it comes to conditional offers, we do kind of ask some students to have met the requirements of the predicted grades. CUET is something we don't really because a lot of students haven't even taken it at the moment. They'll take it later on, because CUET usually happens later on in the cycle. So yeah, I mean, it's something we can consider. We do consider sometimes, but it's not, it's not the decision-making factor in the application process.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Manat. Kopal, I had a question for you. Students are often confused, and they have this perception that self-predicted grades are less important than school or counselor predicted grades. So would you like to clarify?
Right. So, we understand that students from various cities, various schools apply to us, and we want to be very inclusive of everybody who applies to us. And we also know that a lot of schools do not, have the practice of predicting scores for students on their behalf. So in order to, be very inclusive, we've also, let students predict scores for themselves. And that being said, there isn't really a distinction between a self or a school predicted score. So, you should definitely, try to reach out to your school and see if they are willing to, and if they do have a policy to, issue these scores for you. But if they don't, you can, you're fully capable of predicting this for yourself. You've been doing your assessments, and you would know how you also would do in your board examinations based on how prepared you feel. So it's totally acceptable for students to do that for themselves, and it does not put them at a disadvantage at all.
Right.
But
Thank
also,
you.
that
Yes.
said, I just want to add a slight caveat
Sure.
that do not be outrageous in your predictions. Make your predictions reasonable, because there are offers. For instance, the conditional offer, which may make it contingent upon your prediction. Which may make your offer contingent upon what you predict. So do not predict all hundreds if you don't think you'll get that.
And if you do manage to get all hundreds, I would be very, very happy for you. All right. Circling back to you, Manat, here's another question on SAT, ACT scores. A student is asking, if the SAT super score is not above 1300, then should we put it on the application?
See, mentioning your SAT scores is not compulsory, right? If you feel there have been certain factors that have kind of made you, not be able to perform well, it's up to your discretion whether you want to put it up or not. I mean, it's always advisable to kind of put the score out there so that we can, just have an idea of like, how the student has performed, what they have done. But at the end of the day, I think the decision is up to the students. There are other components of the application that are that are mandatory. I think you can decide for yourself whether you would like the committee to know what your SAT score is or not, and how you feel you've performed, and if you'd like us to kind of have kind of an idea of your performance on the particular test.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Mannat. Okay. Kopal, a student is asking, if I don't have certificates for my extracurricular, what should I do?
Right. So, when you look at the extracurricular section in your application form, you'll see that it's divided into two sections. One is where you write activities and the other is where you talk about books that you're interested in. And also we realize that activities that students engage in also vary across the spectrum. So, for instance, I might be heavily invested in baking, and there is no certification for me to say that I bake. I'm a baker, but I may have a thriving, home business. So in this case, what you can do is you can, instead of a certificate, you can supplement your activity with other kinds of supplements. You can add pictures. If you're a writer, you can also write samples. You can upload samples of your writing. If you're into art, you can also upload, your artwork. So try to, minimize doubt for the reader, whoever will read your application, and try to give them as much information as is possible. And if you've, for instance, participated in sports, but you've not been able to get any certificates, see if your school can attest that for you. If your school can vouch for the fact that you participated in so and so activity, and, however you did in that activity. So if you do not get a certificate from whatever organization hosted whatever competition, you can always reach out to your school. Even if, you do not get something, even then it is possible to write your activities in your application, describe them very well, about what your participation was, what are some things that you really learned from that engagement. And it is possible to also submit your application without a certificate.
Thank you so much for that, Kopal. And very interesting to see that baker example. I often share it with my students as well. All right. So here's a question for you, Mannat. A student is asking, for the main essay, which is of 400 words, can we choose anything we're passionate about, like cinema or books, or does it have to be related to our intended major?
That's an interesting question. I think if I'm correct, the first question is about conversations you would like to have with your friends. And I'm sure not everyone is talking about academics 24/7. So, you can definitely talk about things that you are passionate about, right? And we also love to hear such stories and, read such essays, because, there is a lot more to people apart from their academic interests and, what that, apart from those interests. So, we have had essays where students, have been really passionate about, plants, gardening, and have really explored that passion of theirs and then have written about it. We have students who have written about, a variety of other topics, to topics that even we wouldn't have thought of, when we think of writing essays and, conversations with friends. So yeah, definitely, you can definitely go ahead and write something that you're passionate about. Just make sure that it is, coherent. Like, Kopal and I have stressed before, that it's coherent, that, you have kind of put some effort into it and have not just jotted down a few ideas in 10-15 minutes and have submitted the app. So yeah, I think that is what you should look at while trying to, think of something and write an essay. Think of something that excites you, something that you're passionate about, a topic that you feel like you have kind of explored a bit more, or engaged with, and just write about it, jot on a few points, then kind of work on it further, so that when we also read such essays, we also can feel the excitement and the passion that you feel about the said topic.
Thanks for that, Mannat. Here's another question for you. A student is asking, a rather interesting question. A student is asking, are there any particular kinds of books that I should have read, or can it be based on my interest on any topic?
It can definitely be based on any topic of interest that you might have. They don't have to like be really intellectual, theoretical books. A lot of people really enjoy fiction, fantasy fiction. So a lot of people have written about, have kind of mentioned the books that they've read in those genres. And I mean, we enjoy them too. It's not like all of us are sitting around just reading theoretical and intellectual books, right? We also really enjoy a light book once in a while. So yeah, write about what it is that you enjoy, because we, like I said before, we do like to see that side of students and applicants.
Thank you so much for that, Manit. Now we have a few questions on the AAA for you, Gokul. The first question is, will the internal assessment test be applicant for everyone, and when will it be held?
Right, so I assume the person's talking about the AAA.
Right.
So everybody who submits their application in round 3 will be eligible to do the AAA, and the AAA will be held on 26th of April. So this month, around 9 to 10 days after you submit your application. And it will be an online test. So, you do not have to travel to any particular center. You can do it from your homes if you have a laptop or a desktop. Internet connection and a webcam is essentially what you need to do this assessment from your homes. And yeah, it's going to be held on the 26th.
Right. Here's another question. I think we slightly covered it, but I guess we will need some more clarification. The assessment will be only from our related subjects, or other subjects are also included in it. For example, if I want to do BA from history honors, will there be questions related to science or other subjects in the assessment?
Right. So, Ashoka is a liberal arts university. And when you give an admission, you're not given admission to a particular program. So you might want to, right now study history, but you still have 3 semesters to decide what you would really want to major in. So, keeping this in mind, the AAA is also very subject neutral. So we would not ask you questions specifically on history, because we would like to see, what your problem solving skills are like. How well do you critically engage with text that's been given to you? What are your, numerical abilities? What are your spatial abilities? So it's not really a test for your subject knowledge. It's more, an overall holistic assessment. And you should definitely check out the sample paper, so you'd sort of know what kinds of questions to expect when you do the assessment. And while we're talking about the AAA, I'd also like to say that when you fill out your application form, there is a support section. In that support section, if you feel or if you have been getting any sort of help, for instance, a scribe or any sort of compensatory time for any kind of need that you may have. You may be on the spectrum for a learning disability, or you may have some different needs that would require special assistance. So do mention that over there, so the team will be able to assess and review your request and grant you whatever special accommodations you might need.
Right. Here's a follow-up question. Being an international student, is the AAA still compulsory?
Yes. So the AAA is compulsory for everybody who wants to be a student at Ashoka. So if you submit your applications on this 15th for round 3, you'll be able to do your assessment on 26th.
Thank you so much for those answers, Gopal. Here are a few questions on the spot essay for you, Manat. A student asked, when is the AAA thinking skills assessment and on the spot essay for round 3? I think that has just been covered. But they'd like to know, are they on separate days or the same day?
Yeah. You were muted for a bit, Priya. I didn't hear the last part of your question.
Right. So a student wants to know whether the on-the-spot essay happens with the thinking skills assessment, or is it on another date?
All right. Yeah, no, both on the spot essay and the Ashoka aptitude assessment are going to take place on the same day. Usually, when you log in to do your assessment, I think the on the spot essay will be the first part, and then you kind of move on to the other sections. So yeah, both of them are going to be held on the same day, which is the 26th of April. And yeah, do ensure that you get the test, because your application will not be considered if you do not take the AAA.
Right. Here's a follow-up. What are some of the topics for on-the-spot essay?
All right. Yeah, I can see how this can be a source of worry for some students, but I don't think you need to be that stressed about it, because, from our end too, we do ensure that the topics that we put forth for on the spot assessment are topics that are very accessible and topics that, everyone knows about. So, you won't have topics specific to like the sciences, or specific to history, or specific to political science. There are no subject specific topics as such. It's going to be a very general topic that we kind of, ask students to write their views on, and, kind of just debate on or talk about. So yeah, when it comes to, I think, when you look at the sample, the sample paper that's there on the website, there'll be a section for the on-the-spot assessment too, which I think might give you a look or like an idea of what questions to expect. But, I'll repeat myself, don't get too worried about it. The questions that we asked our students are quite general, because we don't look to gauge their, theoretical knowledge, so to say. We just want to see how students think and how they form arguments. That is what we are primarily looking at. So yeah, I think you can be rest assured, it shouldn't be that difficult.
All right. Here are a couple of questions on LOR, which is the letter of recommendation. A student is asking here, Manat, when is the last day to submit recommendation letter for our recommenders?
All right. I think, the last day to submit your recommendation letter is going to be to the 22nd of April. I think it's about 7 days after you submit your application. That's the time frame we give recommenders to kind of get back and submit their, students' recommendations. So yeah, and, do ensure that you keep in constant touch with your recommenders, so that, because sometimes they also forget that they have to, submit a student's recommendation. So do keep in touch with them and get back and ask them whether they remember to have submitted it, and, see where they are in that process. But yes, to answer your question again, it is the 22nd of April. That's the last day when, you can kind of, or your recommender can submit their LORs.
Right. So students are asking, who should I get the LOR from?
Interesting question. I think, a lot of students do spend a lot of time thinking about who, they should really kind of select to write the recommendation letters. So, I think what we also tell a lot of students is that, choose a professor, a teacher who knows you best. Right? It doesn't have to be the school principal. It doesn't have to be like, a head of department. It can be a class teacher. It can be anyone like your close, or like, who has seen your work, who has seen you grow at school, who knows you well enough to kind of write a recommendation for you, and who knows you well enough to kind of portray you in a way where we also feel like we know a particular side of you. So think about it. Think about who you think you have a good relationship with at school. Think about, a professor you might have worked closely with, or like a subject that you really enjoy, someone's class you really enjoy. And, maybe ask those teachers to write your recommendation letters.
Great. Here's the last question for LOR. Can you tell us the process of obtaining the LOR? Can I submit it directly, or does it have to be submitted by the recommender?
All right, I'll take a bit of the question. Kopal can, add in a few points if I missed out on anything. The process of obtaining an LOR, like I said initially, is to first, understand this, who you want a recommendation from. Identify an individual who knows you well, who you think can, talk about your particular skills and, your skill set, and approach them, see if they're all right with writing a recommendation, because not all teachers, not all professors are willing to write one. So, you approach your professor, talk to them about the deadline, talk to them about, why the recommendation is needed, talk to them about Ashoka University and why you're interested in the university, so that they also have an idea of like what your future goals are. So once you do this, in your application, I think when you enter the details of your professor, after they agree that, okay, you know what, I'll write an LOR for you, there's a space where you enter their email ID and, where you enter their phone number. So usually once you enter that, a link goes to your recommender, which will ask them to write the recommendation and then submit it from their end. The recommender will not send the letter to you and you do not submit it on their behalf. The recommender directly submits the letter of recommendation. So yeah, that's how you usually go about it. Kopal, anything else to add? All right.
All right. Thank you so much for answering all those questions, Manat. I see some more questions about LOR are pouring in, but just to conclude, your recommenders have until 7 days after the deadline, the round deadline, which is going to be 22nd of April, until they can submit the LOR. You can get your LOR written from anyone who you have worked with in a professional capacity. And you cannot submit offline LORs. You can't submit it directly. You don't email it to the admissions committee. Your recommender will receive an email and they have to submit it themselves. And you will upload your recommender's email as a part of your application process. All right. Moving on to a few interview questions. So, Kopal, if a person doesn't do well in the AAA, would they be allowed to sit for the interview?
Right. So, the AAA does not have a very direct bearing on if your application gets shortlisted. So, how you will participate in the interview is if your application gets shortlisted. And while AAA is one component, it will also, depend on how well you engage with the application form, how detailed it is, how genuinely and how sincerely you've given us, information about yourself, what sort of engagement, and also how well you do on the spot essay. So all of these components go together into the admissions committee deciding if you would be shortlisted for the interview stage or not. So do not worry if you think you've not done very well in the AAA.
Right. Here's the next question. What can I expect in the interview? How should I prepare?
So it's an interesting question. And, during interviews, we often ask students to really relax and be themselves. And as interviewers, we realize that this is advice that's easy to give, but probably not as easy to follow. So, really come with very little pre-preparation. Do not think of responses that we may want to hear. So really, engage with the questions that are asked of you during the interview, and, know your application well. Maybe go over the application, go over the university's website, sort of see what are things that really appeal to you about Ashoka. Why would you want to be at Ashoka? If there are particular courses that caught your attention. So, maybe be a little curious about that. So, things that we like to see in your application are also things that we like to see in the interview. So we'd like to see how curious are you about yourself, about the university, what sort of engagement do you show with your interest areas? And, these are things that you would have already talked about in your application. So the interview in many ways is an extension of your application, but it's a conversation with an actual person. It's a verbal conversation. It's not something that you write. So be relaxed is advice number one, and know your application well is advice number two.
Just to follow up, Gopal, how well prepared should students be with their with the knowledge of their preferred majors or minors?
Right. So, the interview, much like the application and the AAA, is not is not an area where we check for subject specific interests and domain. But that being said, if you say you want to study economics, and if you have studied economics in school, or even if you haven't studied economics in school, we'd be interested to know why you are curious about economics. We'd not make you do calculus or, a difficult calculations around economics, but we would like to see what is it about economics that, is so interesting to you that you'd want to pursue it at the collegiate level. So, I mean, while you do not need to come in with facts and figures, you do need to know why you want to study what you want to study.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Gopal. Here's a logistical question. When will the interviews be held if your application is shortlisted for the same?
Right. So, typically you can expect to hear from us in a week after you do the assessment. So, interviews usually are held in 10 days after your assessment. So for round 3, maybe the first week of May or the second week of May is when you should, be ready for interviews. But since interviews are also online, you don't really have to worry about traveling to any particular place. You can do it from home or wherever you have access to a laptop or a desktop.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Gopal. Manath, here's a financial aid related question, financial aid / scholarship. So a student is asking, what is the process of applying for a scholarship?
All right. So, when it comes to financial aid, one is only eligible to apply for financial aid after they've received an offer confirming, whether after they received an acceptance offer, basically. So that's not something you should think about right now at this stage. Once you kind of receive a letter confirming your, offer at Ashoka, you also, along with that acceptance letter, we also release the financial aid forms, and students then go through the process of filling those forms out. So, that's that. And, scholarships are available for students interested in the sciences who are interested in pursuing sciences. So that also has an application process that students can kind of, work on after they receive their acceptances.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Manath. Here's a follow-up. Is the scholarship or financial aid available for all the 4 years of undergraduate program?
Right. So I'll take this question. Yes. So your financial aid will be applicable for all the 4 years of your undergraduate program. And, if you feel like your family's financial situation changes after a year, you can also, apply for a revision or, for a review of the aid that has been given to you. Or if you weren't given any aid, to begin with, but if there have been any changes in the circumstances of your family, you can write to the financial aid office and they'll be happy to review, whatever the decision on aid for you was.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Gopal. Here are a few general queries that are from the application form. The student is asking, is there any way that I can discard an ongoing application because I'd like to change my email address?
Right. So this is, I think, an important logistical question that we must answer. So,
Right.
You should only fill out an application with an email ID that you have access to throughout, because this is an email ID that you would not be able to change later. So in case you've begun an application ID with a faulty email ID or an email ID that you don't have access to or would not have access to in the future, our suggestion would be to, copy paste the information that you would have entered in this ID in this application with the incorrect email ID, begin a new application form, replicate the information that you would have in application number 1, and then, proceed with your fresh application, ensuring that it is an email ID that you would have access to constantly. And this is something that we will not be able to change later, right? So be very mindful of that.
Right. Here's another logistical question. Can you explain what happens post the application submission on the 15th?
Right. So, once you submit your application for round 3 on the 15th, you will hear from us, and you will hear from us, and you will you will get an acknowledgement email for receiving your application. And after that, you will also hear communication about the AAA, which is on the 26th. And I think on the 24th or the 25th, you will also get an email from the admissions office to check, your browser compatibility, your desktop or laptop compatibility, to see if your, device is compatible for the AAA, and if you have a stable internet connection, and, just to get some logistical things out of the way, so you don't have to worry on the day of the AAA about, how to go about it. So these are some, emails that you would receive from us. And yeah, I mean, it's very straightforward, so you don't have to be nervous about this at all.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you so much for that, Gopal. Here's a question. Manat, is there something that we can do to make our application stand out? The student asks.
Nice question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is, put in some effort. Really think about, because an application is an important process of the whole admission cycle, right? And it gives us an idea. It's the first step for us to see who you are as people. So do kind of put in a bit of effort into filling out the application, filling out the essays, think about, the extracurriculars that you participated in, the books that you have read, so on and so forth. Apart from that, ensure that, you are honest when it comes to the application and the information you're filling out in there. Because, we do, when people are dishonest, we do realize what is going on there. And, that is unfair to you and to us, because then it immediately disqualifies an individual's application. So, be honest with who you are, and who you want us, who you think we should be looking at while reading our application. Apart from that, ensure that there's some coherence, when it comes to filling out your essays, when it comes to working on them. Ensure that, there's maybe like there's a particular line of thought that you're following, and, ensure that it's kind of, easily accessible. Because, if you find it difficult to read and, understand, if you find it difficult to read and understand what you have written, we are going to have an even tougher time. So yeah, I think these are some of the points that you should keep in mind. But also don't get too frazzled with it. Do kind of have your fun with it. Because there are quite a few fun questions on there. So yeah, take your time, understand what the questions are, look at the application process, and, give it your best, and yeah, have fun with it. That's what I can say.
Very true. Very true. Here are a couple of questions for you, Gopal. These are related to majors. A student is asking, does one apply for a double major, or is it decided once? Just a second. I'm so sorry for that. Yeah. So a student is asking, does one apply for a double major, or is that decided when someone gets admission?
Right. So I will take this question. So you do not, right away decide your double major, when you apply and when you fill out your major preferences in the application. And the major that you also indicate in your application in the course preference section is only indicative in nature. It is not something that, it's not binding. You do not have to go ahead with that particular major. And if you, in the course of your education at Ashoka decide that you would like to pursue a double major, so, you can sort of figure out a way with the Office of Academic Affairs and your supervisor to see how you can, work on that second major. So that's not something that you upfront, put out in your application form.
Right. Another question is, if we have to declare our major at the end of third semester, how does the curriculum go about in the first year?
Right. So, this is where we would say, as, we meet a lot of students for interviews, and a lot of students have this question. So one thing to do would be to look at the website and go through the foundation courses. So Ashoka offers 9 foundation courses, and in your first semester, you do 4 foundation courses, right? And these foundation courses vary from various fields, for instance, natural sciences, social sciences, humanities, right? So that's what you do in your first semester. And then in your second and third semester, you can choose to do a couple of foundation courses, or also do a couple of entry-level courses into disciplines that you think you might want to major in. For instance, if you want to study economics, there is a particular mathematics course that would be required for you to do economics, right? So you may want to do that, or 100 level, which is an entry level course for economics. Or, you did your foundation courses in the first semester and discovered that you actually really enjoy history as well. So you might want to do 100 level or an entry level history course to see if that is something that you'd want to, pursue as your major, or even, right.
Sorry,
So,
I think Komal's video lagged a little.
sorry, let me check my internet. Right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, all good now.
Right.
Okay. Thanks for answering that, Kopal. Manat, I have a couple of questions for you. So a student is asking, I've been working the whole of this year supporting my brother's organization and would like to get back to academics this year. Is that okay?
Yes, that is definitely all right. We do have quite a lot of students who have taken gap years or who have taken years to kind of explore other interests before coming back, to this academic field and before applying to school. So, definitely apply and, to universities and apply to Ashoka and get back to academics if that is what you wish to do. We are very open to kind of hearing about such experiences and seeing what you have been able to do in the year that you have taken after your high school. And a lot of students also talk about it in their applications, so do use that space to kind of talk about what you've done during the year supporting your brother's organization, or even like when it comes to other students, if any of you have taken a gap year, do use the space given in the application to talk about what you've done during that year, because we do love to hear explorations that you have gone through, and we do love to talk about it during interviews too. So long story short, yes, please do apply. There is no, there is nothing negative that, attached to being away from academics for a few years before getting back to university. We really don't look down on it. And yeah, so yeah, go forth and hopefully you kind of enjoy the process of getting back into the academic field.
Yes. So here's another question for you, Manat. A student says, my academics were impacted due to mental and physical health issues, but I believe my activities are good enough. Do you think my marks would be a drawback for me?
Not necessarily, because we are very cognizant of like mental and physical health struggles that a lot of students go through, especially after the onset of the pandemic. I think these conversations have been a lot more prevalent, and there's a lot more sensitivity also and cognizance of such issues. So what we do recommend is there's like a section in the application asking students to talk about their struggles with mental health, and how they feel it has impacted their journey so far. So do make use of that particular section. Do talk about any impact that you feel it has had on your academic performance, or on your journey so far. And we do really have a thorough look at it in a holistic manner. So there's to cut the long story short, no, there is we don't really, if mental or physical health has had an impact on your academics, it is not something that is going to disqualify you immediately. We do look at students in a holistic manner, and we would also like to see how you have been able to kind of come out of that journey, or how you think you are ready for university. But one thing that I would like to kind of tell students struggling with mental health or physical health is, do ensure that you yourself are ready for what university has to offer and the rigor that university has to offer. And if you feel that you're ready, then please go ahead. We would love to look at your applications and talk to you and learn more about you in the process.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Mannat. So now I have a couple of questions from the extracurricular, co-curricular section. A student is asking, this is open to either of you. A student is asking, can one give references of research papers or awards with online links, predominantly international ones?
All right. So I think I'll take this one.
Yeah.
So, in the extracurricular section, we usually prefer if students, talk about their extracurricular activities and typically activities that they would not have done within the classroom. So if they think this research paper is something that they've not done for their class work, or, anything required in their school curriculum, I think they can mention it. And there is a space for them to, write the level at which they've done this, so they can attach that level, and they can also attach the paper and certificates to say whatever distinction they got as a part of that activity.
Right. Here's another question from the same section. A student says the application form has limited fields / word limits for ECA. Can a Google Drive link be added to the ECA box?
Right. Sorry, go ahead, Mana.
Yeah, I can take this one. Yes, a Google Drive link can be added. Usually students would put something, if they've really engaged with art or music over multiple years. There's really not much space in the section to kind of, talk about everything that they've done in the field. So they'll mention music, they'll give a bit of a description about that activity, and then in the attachments attach a link to a Google Drive talking about, how much they have engaged with that particular field and detailing their exploration of it. So yes, you definitely can attach, supplementary material if you feel that space is limited for you.
Great. All right. So now we have a few questions on the essays. And even during my presentation, I mentioned that essays are a very, very important component of your application. So a student is asking, should we write about our personal experiences in the essay?
All right, so I will, begin this response, and Manat, if I've left out something, please chip in. So you will see that there are two questions that we ask you. And the first one is, something that you're very passionate about, something that you can endlessly talk about with your friends, your peers at university. So, I think this essay probably would not have a lot of scope for a personal experience. You wouldn't really endlessly talk about a particular personal experience endlessly with everybody. So maybe try to push the boundaries of that. But if you think that your personal experience really does respond to the prompt, then, you can talk about it. But ideally, I would say maybe try to see if there is something apart from a personal experience that you can also bring in. And the second question really is where you can, show more of your personality and, your personal preferences. So I would suggest that maybe look at, how you would want to sort of distribute your experiences and your interest areas in your essays.
Right. Here's another question, rather interesting. So a student says, if I am passionate about something that does relate to my intended major, and I write on that thing, is that a bad thing? For example, if I feel passionate about an issue of socioeconomic injustice and wish to write on that in my main essay, and my intended major is economics and finance, does that put me at a disadvantage?
Yeah, I can take that question. Most definitely not. That will not put you at a disadvantage. Because, like we say, like Kopal just mentioned, we do like in the first essay is trying to gauge what students are passionate about and what they can really talk about endlessly, right? And if you feel that the subject you have is something you're extremely passionate about, and maybe, something like social justice is something you're extremely passionate about, then please go ahead and write about it. We would love to kind of hear or hear from you and read the essay and see how well it kind of correlates to your subject interest and correlates to you basically overall as a person. So yeah, do go ahead and write about topics that you feel are related to your majors. You will not be penalized for it. So yeah, I don't think you need to be that worried or anxious about that.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Manat. Here are a couple of questions for the AAA that I'd like to ask you. Question number one is there a time limit for completing the AAA? And how many language options will be available in the assessment?
So the time limit for the AAA is 90 minutes. And the language options available is 1. So you can do the AAA only in the English language. But for the time limit, if you feel like you need some sort of additional support, any compensatory time, you should, mention that in the application. So the team can review your request, and, if your request seems something that we offer a compensatory time for, then we will make that allowance for you.
Right. Here are a couple of questions on the on-the-spot essay specifically. Question number one is what is the time limit for the on-the-spot essay, and how many words are you expected to write?
I think you get 30 minutes for the on-the-spot essay. When it comes to the number of words that you're expected to put down, I think what we look for is really coherence in argument and, some kind of thought process having gone into the question that has been asked of you. 100 words is not going to kind of tell us anything about your thought process or what you feel about a particular topic. So, do put in some effort, do think about it, jot down at least maybe 400 words when it comes to that particular essay, so that we can see how much you have really thought about that particular topic and how you kind of structure arguments in your mind and how your thought process is. So yeah, don't really keep it too short. And while we are aware that there is a time limit, we don't need fancy words, we don't need some really fancy, structured, or nuanced arguments. We want something that, we want something that kind of showcases your thinking skills and showcases how you think as individuals. And, that's what we are mainly looking for in on-the-spot essays. So yeah, like I said before, do put in some effort, try to, kind of write around 400 words.
Right. All right, then Manat and Kopal, I would like to thank you so much for answering all the queries. And I would like to thank our audience for joining us today for the webinar. I hope you were able to find answers to all your last minute questions. We would really appreciate if you could take a minute to share your valuable feedback with us. The link to the feedback form is provided in the chat box. Please note that the recording of this session will be available on Ashoka's YouTube channel in case you would like to share it with your friends. Last few points before we wrap up today's session. The last date to submit your application in round 3 is 15th of April. I repeat, it's 15th of April. You can secure your admission even without 12th board marks or CUET. Students and parents can visit Ashoka University for a campus tour. The link to register for the campus tour is provided in the chat box. If you have any further queries at all regarding various aspects of the university, please feel free to write to us at ugapply@ashoka.edu.in or call on the number shown on your screen. Once again, I thank you all for taking out the time to participate in this discussion. This brings us to the end of the session. Please take care and stay safe.